Walk into any high-end antique gallery, a preserved Victorian estate, or the hollowed-out ruins of a 19th century mansion, and you will see them, standing like silent sentinels of a forgotten age, ornate, massive, polished to a haunting mirror-like gold. The brass bed, the official narrative, the one found in interior design textbooks and sanitized history museums, tells us that these were simply a fashion statement. We are told that as the Victorian middle class grew in wealth, they demanded furniture that looked like gold to signal their status. We are told, with a patronizing smile, that brass was chosen because it was hygienic compared to wood, which supposedly harbored bedbugs and bacteria in its pores. That is the safe story. It is logical, it is convenient, and if you look at the physics of the materials involved, it is a blatant, calculated lie. Because when you look at the architecture of a true high-end Victorian brass bed, you aren't looking at furniture, you are looking at a passive electromagnetic resonator. Take a moment to strip away the decor. Look at the materials. Brass is not a primary metal, it is an alloy of copper and zinc. In the world of modern electrical engineering, copper is the undisputed king of conductivity. It is the material we use to move power, to transmit data, and to build the nervous system of our global civilization. Zinc, its partner in the alloy, is the material used for grounding and cathodic protection. When you combine these two into the specific geometry of a Victorian headboard, you aren't building a place to rest your head. You are building an antenna array. Why did the wealthiest elites of the 19th century, the titans of industry, who had access to the finest mahogany, the rarest oaks, and the softest silks, insist on sleeping inside a conductive metallic cage? Why are these beds designed with specific vertical rods, spherical finials, and symmetrical crossbars that mimic, with terrifying precision, the exact geometry of passive radio resonators and biot-savart loops? The truth is that before the year 1920, sleep was not seen as a biological shutdown. It was seen as an act of synchronization. Our ancestors understood a fundamental truth about the human nervous system that has been intentionally scrubbed from the modern medical curriculum. The human body is not a chemical machine. It is an electrical organism. Our hearts beat to an electrical pulse. Our brains communicate via frequency. And our sleep, the period where we are supposed to regenerate, is entirely dependent on our connection to the Earth's natural electromagnetic field, specifically the Schumann resonance. The brass bed was the charging cable for the human soul. It was a localized environment designed to filter the atmospheric static of the aether and amplify the healing frequencies of the planets. And the reason your modern mattress feels like a dead weight, and the reason you wake up more tired than when you went to sleep, is because the high-frequency era was intentionally dismantled. They didn't just change the furniture, they severed the connection. To understand why your current bed is made of memory foam, synthetic glue, and dead timber, you have to look at the great frequency war of the 1920s. This was the decade the industrial titans, the men who owned the chemical plants, and the emerging pharmaceutical empires won the battle for the human body. Before this era, health was understood as an electrical state. Men like Nikola Tesla and the biologist George Lakhovsky were conducting experiments that proved every living cell in the human body operates as a tiny oscillating circuit. They proved that when a cell's vibration drops below a certain frequency, it enters a state of dis-ease. When that vibration is boosted back to its natural resonance, the cell regenerates. Lakhovsky's most famous invention, the multi-wave oscillator, used concentric copper rings to create a high-frequency field that allowed the body to auto-tune itself back to health. Now, look closely at the design of a 19th century brass bed. The vertical rods are the inductors. The circular joints are the capacitors. The hollow brass spheres at the corners are charge accumulators. When a human being, essentially a bag of conductive salt water, lays down within this brass frame, they're entering a passive Faraday cage. The bed was designed to shield the sleeper from the electric noise of the atmosphere, the sudden shifts in weather, the static of lightning, and the rising tide of early industrial radio waves. But more importantly, it acted as a resonance amplifier. By sleeping surrounded by highly conductive metal that was grounded to the floor, the Victorian sleeper was clamped to to the Earth's 7.83 Hz frequency. This is the alpha state. It is the frequency of deep healing, rapid cellular repair, and lucid dreaming. The brass bed was a passive healing chamber that required no external power source. It worked simply by existing in harmony with the physics of the Earth. So, why did the brass bed go out of style so abruptly between 1910 and 1930? The history books claim it was because of the modernist movement. They say people wanted cleaner lines and warmer materials, but look at the timing. This was the same period that the Flexner Report was released, which effectively outlawed electrotherapy and vibrational medicine in the United States. This was the same period the first large-scale electrical grids were being draped across the cities. If you sleep in a resonant brass bed, your nervous system remains highly tuned. You are more intuitive. You require less pharmaceutical intervention. You are harder to manipulate because your frequency is locked to the Earth, not to the static of the local environment. But if you move the entire population into non-conductive wood or synthetic petroleum foam, you effectively ground the human spirit in the wrong way. You turn the bedroom from a charging station into a lead box. The industrial titans didn't stop making brass beds because they were old-fashioned. They stopped making them because they were functional. They realized that a population that sleeps in a state of high vibration is a population that cannot be easily sedated. They replaced the cathedral in the bedroom with a sponge in a box, and we have been waking up in a fog ever since. If you have ever touched the finials, the large brass balls that sit at the four corners of an old-fashioned bed, you might have noticed they are almost always hollow. Most people assume this was a cost-saving measure to use less metal, but in the world of atmospheric electricity, a hollow metal sphere is a very specific tool. In physics, a sphere is the most efficient shape for the accumulation and distribution of a static charge. It is why the Van de Graaff generator uses a sphere, and why ancient lightning rods were topped with them. This isn't decoration, this is etheric engineering. The architects of the old world knew that the atmosphere is not empty space. It is a fluid, pressurized environment full of ions and etheric energy. By placing 4 hollow brass spheres at the cardinal points of a sleeping body, you create what is known in physics as a quadrupole field. The vertical brass rods connecting these spheres act as waveguides. They take the subtle electrical potential from the air and the magnetic pull from the ground, and they create a standing wave over the mattress. This standing wave acts as a protective bubble. It filters out the chaotic frequency of the world and creates a localized frequency sanctuary. Think of it like a noise-cancelling headphone for your entire body. Now, compare this to a modern luxury mattress. Most modern mattresses, even the expensive ones, contain independently racked steel coils. From a distance, this sounds like it might be conductive, but the physics is the exact opposite of the brass bed. Steel is a ferrous metal. It is magnetic, but it is a poor conductor compared to brass. Each of those 1,000 plus steel springs in your mattress acts as a Biot-Savant loop, but because they are disconnected from each other and wrapped in synthetic fabric, they don't create a shield. Instead, they act as tiny antennas. In our modern world, we are swimming in a soup of electrosmog. 4G, 5G, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, and the 60 Hz hum of the wires in your walls. When you lay down on a modern spring mattress, those steel coils catch those high-frequency signals and concentrate them directly into your tissues. You aren't sleeping on a bed. You are sleeping on a micro-antenna array that is vibrating your cells with the static of the internet. The Victorian brass bed was designed to protect you from the atmosphere. The modern bed is designed to turn your body into a receiver. We have traded the protective resonance of the brass age for the interference of the digital age. When you look at the finials on an old bed, you are looking at the remnants of a high science that prioritized the biological integrity of the human being. They didn't need sleep trackers or smart apps to tell them if they slept well. They had the geometry, they had the metal, and they had the frequency. If the transition from brass to steel was a move toward interference, the transition to memory foam was the final blow in the war for the human nervous system. To understand why, we have to look past the marketing clouds and into the dark chemistry of the dead zone. Follow the money. Memory foam is not a comfort innovation, it is a waste product innovation. It is a polyurethane derivative, a petroleum-based polymer that is essentially a solidified chemical sponge. In the language of physics, memory foam is a total dielectric. This means it is a perfect insulator. It has zero conductivity. It is designed to be the ultimate barrier. For 2 million years of human evolution, we slept in direct or near direct contact with the earth, whether it was on animal hides, straw, or conductive metal frames. Our bodies were constantly grounding. The human body is a giant capacitor that builds up a positive electrical charge throughout the day. To heal, the body must dump that charge into the negative reservoir of the earth. This is a biological necessity known as electron exchange. When you sink into a memory foam mattress, you are entering a state of total electrical isolation. You are unplugged from the planet. You are sleeping in a static dead zone. The result of this isolation is the modern epidemic of chronic inflammation. Inflammation is, at its root, an electrical stator buildup of positive ions that have nowhere to go. Because you are sleeping on a petroleum-based insulator, those ions remain trapped in your tissues, vibrating at the frequency of stress rather than the frequency of repair. But there is an even darker layer to this foam trap. Memory foam is viscoelastic, meaning it reacts to your body heat. As your body warms the foam, it releases volatile organic compounds, VOCs. You are breathing in a cocktail of formaldehyde, benzene, and flame retardants for 8 hours a night. This creates a low-frequency coma. You feel heavy when you wake up, not because you slept deeply, but because your body spent the entire night in a state of chemical and electrical hypoxia. The industry calls it restful sleep, but it is actually industrial sedation. They have convinced the public that comfort means sinking into a chemical sponge, when in reality, comfort should mean electrical alignment. A brass bed, connected to the floor and the structure of the house, facilitated the grounding process automatically. It allowed the positive charge to flow out of the body and the negative electrons to flow in. The memory foam revolution ensured that the human body would stay in a permanent state of electrical inflammation, a state that is highly profitable for the healthcare industry. A body that cannot ground itself is a body that stays sick. So we return to the ultimate question. Was the brass bed a fashion statement or a piece of forgotten technology? If you map the decline in human height, the explosion of neurological disorders, and the collapse of the alpha wave sleep state, the timeline matches perfectly with the disappearance of conductive furniture. We moved from the copper and brass era to the plastic and synthetic era, and our biology followed the materials. The elites of the old world, the families whose names still sit on the doors of central banks, did not have smart beds with sensors, Bluetooth connections, or adjustable bases. They had resonance. They understood that the bedroom is the most important room in the civilization because it is where the biological software is updated. If the update happens in a noisy environment, the software becomes corrupted. This is the secret. They don't want you to realize the Earth is a battery and you are a cell. The brass bed was the high-speed charging cable. We don't need more apps to track our sleep scores. We need to return to the physics of the ancients. We need to strip away the dead zone materials and reintroduce conductivity into our sleeping environments. The reason your competitors' videos or the stories of our ancestors seem so viral or magnetic is because they tap into a frequency we have been starved of. We are a low-frequency population trying to solve high-frequency problems. The path back to true health isn't found in a new pharmaceutical or a sleep hack. It is found in the metal, the geometry, and the resonance that our ancestors were once brave enough to build into their very homes. The brass is still out there. It's sitting in antique shops, covered in dust, waiting for someone to realize that it isn't just a bed, it's a gateway to a state of being that was stolen from us. The frequency hasn't changed. The Earth is still humming at 7.83 Hertz. The stars are still broadcasting. The cathedral is still waiting. You just have to change the way you sleep to hear the music again. It's time to stop sleeping on the sponge and start waking up in the resonance.